Yep.
Tonight, in sync with the Torah reading, which is Matan Torah, the Jewish people actually standing at Sinai and receiving the Ten Commandments, our topic is about Torah itself, making Torah real, how we approach Torah. Because I want to start with a provocative question. If we had been amongst the Jewish people and we had come out and we already had understood from Moshe that the process of redemption from Egyptian slavery, which was so harsh and so cruel and so backbreaking, would be that we would come to this place, to Sinai, and we would receive a revelation that would enable us to become Hashem's servants throughout history. That was the clear mission statement. The Jewish people knew it. Moshe was instructed in this right from the beginning that taking the people out, taking the Jewish people, the Exodus itself only had ultimate meaning and value being attached to God's revelation at Sinai and us receiving the Torah. We're not going to discuss tonight that the 10 Debrot, the 10 statements, the 10 commandments that were presented at Sinai were referencing of the entire Torah, but the Torah really wasn't completed as we know it until 40 years later. But this is the moment. The Jewish people, after traveling, after leaving Egypt, after seeing the sea split, they arrive at Mount Sinai, and it's very clear they prepare themselves for 3 days, and they're ready for revelation to take place. And it does. It takes place. So I want to just ask a question. Wouldn't you and I have been wondering what's going on here? The world is already 2,448 years old. We've already seen the family of the Jewish people established: Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, his wives, his children. We already have seen great people arise in the world doing great things and attaching themselves to God and having prophetic visions and the whole fulfillment of all the promises to Abraham that his descendants would go down to Egypt. So we have to ask, why now, at this moment, does God have this moment of revelation? And over the next 40 years, the Torah as we know it today takes shape with its full 613 commandments. And then we become the bearers of that Torah. And in a certain sense, it sounds arrogant to say now, but wouldn't people have been thinking, do we really need this? I mean, after all, am I not a great grandchild of Jacob? Am I not part of this unbelievable enterprise that has distinguished ourselves already? Why do we need this overwhelming experience of revelation, which is really beyond human ability? We know later Moshe is told, Moshe says, show me, he wants an extra attachment to God. And God says, no, you can't live and have that extent of a connection to God. And that's what this borders on. So why now? So it's clear to me is that the only way that revelation at Sinai can be meaningful if we have a sense of needing it to happen, if we have a sense of acceptance that, yes, for the first 2,448 years, God has presided over a world, interacted with Adam and Eve, interacted intensively with Noah, with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, their descendants, without revelation at Sinai. But there's something that we have to recognize about us human beings, and even us, the chosen people, the recipients of Torah, that means that we need this, we require it. And without it, we wouldn't be able to endure. And that's an element of humility, an element of understanding our limitations, an element of understanding that if God is going to speak directly to every man, woman, and child, as God did at Sinai, which is such a momentous intercession in the events of the world, It had to be absolutely necessary. The first key to understanding this is understanding this Torah portion itself. The Torah portion this week is called Yitro. It's named after Moshe's father-in-law. And that has a lot of significance. There are commentaries who ask, shouldn't we have a separate portion of the Ten Commandments? Shouldn't it be the highlight? Why are we focusing on this one individual? And hence we have a lot of significance in the first sentence of this week's Torah reading, found on page 394 in the Stone Chumash, chapter 18, sentence 1. Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midyan Choten Moshe et kol asher asa Elokim b'Moshe u'Yisrael amo ki hotzi Hashem et Yisrael mimitzrayim. So it says that Yitro heard, he understood, he took to heart. The word Yishma, Shama, has a lot of connotations to it. And he made a decision that he's going to join the Jewish people. He took Moshe's wife and children. He wasn't just being a messenger here. And he left his secure place in the world to join the Jewish people. And Rashi very famously in the beginning of this Torah reading says, what did he hear? A funny question, because the Torah says he heard that the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt. But Rashi narrows the focus, quoting a Mechilta, and said he heard about two very specific things. He heard about the splitting of the sea, and he heard about Amalek attacking the Jewish people only out of hatred and out of opposition to the mission of the Jewish people, with no skin in the game, no land to preserve, no personal issue, just out of the idea that someone has to stand up and stop this drumbeat of a chosen people standing at Sinai and bringing Torah into the world. And we know from other sources, one of which is that the word Sinai, the Mount Sinai itself, has the connotation of hatred. And the Medrash says that here hatred entered the world. So this process of us receiving the Torah caused a reaction in the world. It caused an antipathy. It created paradoxical approaches. Some commentaries say that that's what prompted Amalek to head this off, to try to prevent it. And we have real historic evidence and writings that show that this idea of the destiny of the Jewish people needs to be stopped. And those words come from the mouths of some of the great opponents of Judaism, some of the great anti-Semites, as we would call them, throughout history. So we see here that it's not natural for a person. So why does Rashi focus in on these two events? And this is colored different ways, but Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says the following thing. What Rav Moshe says is, what does Rashi mean? He saw the splitting of the sea, and he saw the fact that Amalek attacked. And I'm going to read a little bit more into this, but here's what I would tell you. He saw that Pharaoh himself, after suffering through the 10 plagues, and after running to Moshe and Aaron and saying, leave, please leave, we're at the brink of destruction, take your people, go, get out of here. Paro could still rebound from that moment of clarity and recognition that he's a human being trying to stand in the way of God's manifest supervision of the world, and say, no, we're going to chase them down. We're going to bring them back. They're still our slaves. Who do they think they are? And so you would add, who does God think God is? After all, I'm Pharaoh. So that struck Yitro. Yitro could say, I could remain in Midian. I have status here. I'm a leader. I'm comfortable. I'm wealthy. I have a lot going for me. But I have this vulnerability. If I see a Pharaoh who personally experienced 10 plagues, then chasing down the Jewish people to his ultimate destruction, and then I see Amalek, this nation, this pariah nation in the world, which as Rashi describes elsewhere, it's like somebody jumping into a boiling cauldron of water and saying, everybody's afraid of this cauldron. Everybody thinks it's too hot. I'm going to jump in, even though I'm going to be burned, even though I'm going to suffer, but I'm going to tarnish this aura and this sense of hands-offness. And I'm going to show the rest of mankind, don't think that this people is so extraordinary. You can start up with them when you want. They're fair game, just like any other nation of the world. So what's remarkable about the beginning of this week's Torah reading is what Yitro concluded. Yitro said, I'm aware of everything. This is my son-in-law, and his wife and children are certainly going to join the Jewish people, but I'm also going to join them out of a sense of humility. And humility here I want to define very clearly as being tuned in and aware of the vulnerabilities of human beings, of the idea that ideas don't really determine who we are, that we have a whole mix of emotions, a whole mix of biases, a whole mix of jealousies, a whole mix of arrogance, wanting to prove that we really are superior. And these lethal, at times, mixes of human nature explain why God needs to introduce Torah at this time. Because if there is going to be a people who remain consistent and true and tenaciously cling to maintaining an ongoing, ever deepening relationship with God and connection to God through fulfilling God's will, through fulfilling mitzvot, through standing at Sinai and listening to 10 Dibro, 10 commandments, and accepting them. We will fulfill them. We will make this the most dear, lofty, important part of our lives. Nothing is going to separate us from them. Why? Because it would separate us from God Almighty. And we want to remain clinging and attached and distinguished through our connection to God. So that's the introduction. That's the rightful introduction to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. The introduction of the idea of human frailty, of humility, of a sense that God really is greater, more knowing, more caring in terms of our future and our opportunity to make the most of our lives compared to any other force or idea we can align ourselves with. So therefore, our job becomes to make the Torah real. And I wanted to show you how that plays out. This is a slide. Can everybody see it? I hope you can. The first is a quote from Jonathan Sacks. And we're studying Torah here. And obviously the revelation at Sinai gives us the Torah so that we have access to it and we can make it the guiding points of our life. So Jonathan Sacks wrote, in study, we make Torah real in the mind so that we can make it actual in the world. Do you hear how this idea relates to what Yitro is thinking? It relates to the whole necessary pre-mindset we have to have when we approach revelation at Sinai, when we sit down to study Torah. The Torah, God didn't make a world where when you sin, you die. He sort of laid that out to Adam, but then it was modified. So over time, God introduced death into the world, and lifespans have a limitation so that we don't think we're going to live forever, so that we don't become so convinced that we are God-like to that extent. All those things are true, but it's up to us to make Torah real in the world by making it real to ourselves. The next quote, which is in Hebrew, I'll translate it for everybody. It's the blessing we make every morning, which is on the mitzvah of studying Torah. So the truth is, if you haven't made this blessing yet today, you could say it along. I don't have the full blessing here. I have the centerpiece of it. But it's unusual when you think of the 613 mitzvot. When it comes to the study of Torah, here's what we say: V'ha'ar rev no Hashem Elokeinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu. God should make it pleasant, sweet, We should imbibe Torah. We should see it as an enrichment that we're taking into ourselves, and it should be that way in our mouths as we articulate it, as we study it, and the mouths of the entire nation of Israel. Why? Because we can't continue without Torah. Think of the story of Rabbi Akiva, where he said, the fox tries to lure the fish out of the water and says, come, you'll come up in the land with me. I'll take care of you. I'm powerful. I'll watch over you. And the fish says, without the water, I can't continue. The same humility idea, the same idea that just as a fish needs to stay within the water, we need Torah to be sweet. We need to be habituated to it. We need to be comfortable within it because it is what keeps us going. And then we add v'ni anachnu v'tzetzoreinu v'tzetzorei amcha beis Yisrael, that we, all of us, and our descendants, and all the descendants of the Jewish people, and here's the kicker, kulanu yodei shemecha, we should all know your name, v'lamdei Torah techa lishma, and we should study Torah, to cut off a little bit, we should study Torah for its own sake, out of valuing Torah itself. Now, if you think about it, we could do this same blessing when we put on tefillin in the morning. We could do the same blessing when we light candles. We should say, oh, make the light of the Shabbos candles illuminating and warm. And of course, we want all those things to be. We want our Shabbos table to be a place of joy and connection and happiness, where we really can celebrate Shabbat together as a family. But we don't make such a blessing at that time. Why not? Because again, Torah, when we approach Torah, it's literally the water that we inhabit as fish inhabit water. And what, like Rabbi Akiva said so cogently, and I said to him, don't you want to live? Stop teaching Torah. The Romans had outlawed it. And it was clear to Rabbi Akiva, it's written on his gravestone. You can go to Tveria and see it, where he's buried after he was tortured to death by the Romans. The idea that we need to inhabit the Torah. The Torah needs to inhabit us. We need to be making it real, to use Rabbi Sachs's words, every day of our lives. We need to be actualizing it. Because for the Torah to be a scroll in an ark, or for it to be a book on the bookshelf, or for it to be something that I reference or even hold in esteem, but it's not something that's becoming ever more part and parcel of who I am as I seek to understand it, as I recognize it as a source of truth, as a source of keeping us on the right path that we're meant to be, then the Torah really is not, then it's not introduced to the world. It's not part of the world. It's analogous to a famous thing they say about the Kotzker Rebbe when they ask him, where is God? And the Kotzker Rebbe said, God is wherever you let God in. He didn't like the idea God is everywhere. No, God is not everywhere. We can exclude God, he was implying, so to speak. But when we let God in, when we sit at a Shabbat table and we make Kiddush and we sing and we eat and we discuss Torah and we ask each other how the week has gone and we really connect with one another and we see it as an unbelievable dimension of communion with God, as a whiff of the world to come. So when we do that, we're making it real. We're making Shabbos into a Shabbos. We have many other sources. I just want to refer to a couple of more to make this real. In Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of the Fathers, we have the following idea. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, it's chapter 3, Mishnah 9, says, your wisdom, if your wisdom is greater than your reverence for God, than your fear of sin, then your wisdom is going to depart you. And only if your fear of sin, in other words, if your sense that my wisdom is here to guide me so that I can fulfill what God really wants me to do, that's what the reverence is, then my wisdom will stay within me. We have more simple analogies in the words of the rabbis, but that Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in chapter 3, Mishnah 9 really commends our attention. Because he also says our actions should be greater than our wisdom. And everybody asks, how can my actions be greater than my wisdom? I can't, I'm not, where would that, how could that happen? But the idea being that any good idea I have, I want to actualize it. I want to put it into play. And if I'm not doing that, then that wisdom is just visiting me and it's going to depart. A Talmudic quote: someone who has much Torah but lacks humility is like a farmer who stores beautiful grain in a silo, but forgets to put preservatives, mix preservatives in to protect the grain. So that eventually, when he opens the storehouse and he says, oh, let's take these beautiful olives and let's use it to make oil and let's have a feast and let's have a celebration, the olives are spoiled. They're not able to be accessed. They're not able to be used. And this idea of accessing it, the idea of it being real, there's another statement of the rabbis which is more cryptic, but I think this is what it means. It means as follows. The statement is that if a person possesses Torah, but a person is arrogant, meaning sees the Torah as a tool within my hands rather than a source of guidance to help me direct my life. So he said it's like a person who has the keys to an inner chamber. He has the keys to a vault that's inside a house. So he could go in theory, and open the vault and take out all these precious gems and use them. But he lacks the key to the outside door. He's on the outside looking in. So even though he has this Torah, even though he has these jewels, they're his. Nobody else can get them but him. But they're not going to do him any good if he doesn't see himself as seeking it out, if he doesn't see it as a fish bobbing up to the top of the water and saying, I'm going to go back down again because this is my home. This is where I'm nourished. This is where I'm sustained. And this is the way the Torah, the Matan Torah, is being introduced. And a scholar in residence at Beth Jacob this week taught a lesson. It comes from the Ten Commandments. I want to refer to it, and I think it's the same dimension of understanding, of making something real, of actualizing it. And it's a medrash, again, a medrash, a simple allegory the medrash has, and it's about Shabbos. And of course, Shabbos is part of the Ten Commandments. And Shabbos is unique in the Ten Commandments because we have two versions of Shabbos: Zohar at Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho, remember the Sabbath, and we have Shamor, guard the Sabbath. Okay, we have two aspects to it. And as we say in the song L'Chododi on Friday night, uniquely to the Ten Commandments, when God spoke the Ten Commandments at Sinai, God spoke both words at the same time. And the Jewish people heard both words. So they heard God say Shamor, and they heard God say Zachor, this duality of Shabbos. Remember it and protect it, and it should be holy. That's what it says in it says. So we have a Gemara, actually. No, I'm sorry, we have a Medrash Rabbah, and it's Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, the very mystical sage of the Zohar. And he says the following parable. And I've heard it before. Can't say it meant a lot to me, but let's make it mean more. He says, when the Ten Commandments were spoken, no, I'm sorry, when the world was created, going back to creation, and God created the world in 7 days. 6 days, we know God created the various elements of the world. Seventh day, God rested. So according to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Shabbos, the entity of Shabbos, came before God and says, I have a complaint. I don't understand. You're leaving me hanging out to dry. Every other day has a mate, a zivug, a match befitting it, and I'm left alone. I have no match. I'm bereft of companionship. So what did God answer? So God answers according to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and says, nope, you also have a match. You have the Jewish people. They're your match. They're your mate. They're your zivug. They are your partner throughout history. Okay, now let's just think about this for a second, because most commentaries, and I looked at the commentaries myself. One second, I'm not sharing the screen properly here. Could 1 second. Stop the share. I want to share the screen differently. And I want to, oh, I got to do something else here. I'm sorry, bear with me 1 second. Okay, I hope this will work. Good. Now it's working. Everybody can see this? The 6 days of creation. So there's actually commentaries on this Medrash that are very clear. They say the first day pairs with the second day, the third day pairs with the fourth day, fifth day pairs with the sixth day, and the seventh day stood alone. Shabbos had no partner. And Shabbos felt bereft. And Shabbos complained, and God said, don't worry, the Jewish people will be your partner. Comes along the Vilna Gaon, who writes very, very cryptic explanations to Midrashim. And the Vilna Gaon says, if you want to understand this Medrash, you have to think about it in the following framework. This is what Rabbi Penner spoke about. He says, day number one, what happened on day number one? God created light. Now, again, there's no sun, there's no moon, there's no stars. But God created light. So we say this light was an unbelievable facet of light. With this light, a person could see forever, see through history, see through time, see through space. It was an unbelievable clarity of light. So the Vilna Gaon says, don't pair day one with day two. Pair day one with day four below it. What does that mean? So what does the pairing of the days mean? It means on the very first day of creation, God created this unbelievable, holy, sanctified light. Okay, according to a comment in the Medrash, this light was put away for the righteous people in the world to come. So on day four, what did God do? God actualized light within creation and made it not theoretical, but real. And God created the sun, the moon, the stars, all the luminaries of the heaven. So what the Vilna Gaon, what the Gra is pointing out here is that this pairing of the days is that on day one, God created the theoretical light. All the physicists should love this. And on day four, God created the physical light, which Einstein was able to think about and understand and pattern that the one constant of the universe is the speed of light, whatever all that's about. But it became a reality. It became real, to use the words of Jonathan Sachs. On day two, God separated the lower waters and the upper waters, heaven and earth. What happened on day five? On day five, God created the animals that live in the water and the birds that fly in the sky. So what God did is in day two, God created the framework and the potentiality for there to be life living in the heavens and living on the earth. And then on day five, God actualized that and brought it into fruition. So on day three, what did God do on day three? Okay, day three, dry land, vegetation, the world blossomed. The Vilna Gaon says connect that to day six. You have the animals, human beings. We eat the fruits of the trees. We survive off of what the earth produces. So again, we had the framework created on day three, and the actualization take place in day six. If you take this pattern to heart, then what we have to begin to think about is the following. When God said, remember, guard the Sabbath day, that it should be sanctified, God was in fact saying there's a potentiality created. The potentiality is that there could be a day of connection to God, a day of fulfillment of the purpose of the world, a day that is Me'ein Olam Haba, has a whiff of the world to come. So Shabbos comes to God at the end of creation and says, okay, that's great, God. I see how day one actualized, and day four, day two, and day five, day three, and day six. What about me? What am I supposed to do now? So God basically said, the Jewish people will become your fulfillment. They will actualize you. They will make you happen. Now, that doesn't happen until now when we stand at Sinai. And when God commands us and says, okay, guys, you were enslaved in Egypt. You had no freedom. Your time wasn't your own. You had taskmasters laying out your work for every day. I'm going to relieve you of that. But I'm going to place upon you the responsibility that the seventh day of the week, which until now is lacking its zivug, it's alienated, it's alone, it's estranged, it has no fulfillment, it's not real, to use those words of Rabbi Sachs. Step up to the plate, Jewish people. Make Shabbat real, sanctify it, guard it, remember it, actualize it, just like the pattern of creation commends you to do. And now Shabbat has its fulfillment in the world. So we see from here, in conclusion, this idea 2,448 years into creation, God introduces Torah. God is making real the purpose of creation and entrusting that responsibility to us, the Jewish people. How can the easiest thing we could do to slip away is to go back to that original question. Do I need it? Can I be a great person without Torah? Does it really make a difference what I do on Shabbat? All these questions which puff us up in our own estimation, and would say that rather than seeking connection to God, I'm ready to seek my own path in the world. I mean, we're not Amalek, but on the extreme, I'm going to be in opposition to greatness and spirituality and fulfillment in the world. Amalek chooses that path, and we see people doing it today. And the separation really comes in the idea of, as the rabbis say, Barati Torah, God created the Torah, Tavlin. It's there to heal us. It's there to guide us. It's there to give us a habitation as we make it real in our lives so that we can resist the moments of arrogance, the moments of usurping, the moments of overreaching, of jealousy, of wondering, why can't I be king of the world? Why do I have to be a mere servant of God? That's human frailty. That's human nature. We have an opportunity to supersede that. Yitro starts off this week's Torah portion to remind us that the attitude we bring to the table when we study Torah, yeah, there's a lot of wisdom. Yeah, we can look smart, sound smart. There's a lot of ideas that are ennobling and exciting. But fundamentally, we come to the table with the idea, let's make Torah real in the world. Let's make it not theoretical. Let's actualize it within ourselves. Let's become people whose attitudes and whose character and whose worldview is shaped by Torah. And the way we do that is by studying it pleasantly, just like enjoying it, making it a big part of our lives, a bigger and bigger part of our lives. And just as Shabbat is there to uplift us and to give meaning to the week, so too is Torah there, so to give us the resistance and the staying power, so that we can make the world the place that God intends it to be. We should all this week, as we read about the revelation at Sinai, we should all think hard about things that we resist within Torah, things that we think we don't need about Torah, things that we think are irrelevant to our lives, and think again, because we have potential to be yet greater, better, live a more meaningful life. Please God, this week's Torah reading should have that impact on us, and we should become ennobled by it.